Good morning. Welcome to, I guess, my channel. This live stream is a live stream after all, but it is particularly for brass class, or otherwise known as brass methods, on Thursday, I believe the 14th of September. So good morning, brass class. Good morning, Dr. Staub. And we're going to try to do something that's a little impossible, which is we're going to look at a whole bunch of unique and interesting trumpet instruments. This is a cornet, so we wouldn't call it a trumpet, but you know what I mean. We're going to do a whole bunch of them, I hope. And we're also going to try to get through the entire Arban's book, and we're going to try to get through the Clarke books, two of the Clarke books, and you'll see what I mean as we go. I'm going to put it up on the screen. This is my computer over here. You'll see me reference it a lot. Sorry about that, but it'll all make sense. And we're also going to go through sort of my black book of like sort of bad things that band directors sometimes do that you will want to avoid. And so stay tuned for all of that. I'm going to try to cram it into about 40 minutes. And if anybody has ever been to the stream, I do have the chat open, by the way, so if you see me referencing chat things, that's because there might be people watching live. This is Wednesday, the day before the class. But what was I going to say? It's already going so well. If you've ever been on the stream before, then you know that I'll say I'm going to do this in 15 minutes, and then 45 minutes later, I'm thinking about wrapping up, and then I play 20 more minutes. So without further ado, this is a cornet. This is the predecessor to the modern trumpet in some ways. Natural trumpet, which I don't have here, is sort of our original instrument. In fact, you can look up King Tut trumpet. And this is sort of a quick overview of early trumpet history, but just basically a long tube with a bell at the end. There we go. And that is the original trumpet. It's basically a ceremonial instrument. It plays a couple of notes, and so you could play maybe a basic fanfare on it. And you could even play that fanfare in two parts. So you could have maybe thirds and fourths and fifths, but that would be about it. So that's our original instrument. Then we lengthen it over time. We start to add holes to it in order to improve the intonation and be able to sort of lock in notes that we otherwise really shouldn't play, and that's the Baroque trumpet, or the natural trumpet as we call it. And then we add some more holes, and it looks a little bit like a saxophone for a minute. That's the keyed trumpet, invented by Anton Weidinger, and sort of the reason that we play solo literature today, because none other than Franz Joseph Haydn wrote the piece for the keyed trumpet, because I guess there was some cousin relationship between Haydn and Weidinger. Anyway, he invented a chromatic trumpet, and it wasn't very good, so we didn't keep that. I also don't have one. Nobody has one because they're bad. But they're really interesting, and they're responsible for our sort of foray into solo literature, when before that we just kind of played as a part of a consort, right? Baroque orchestra. And so this is like roughly 1800. Then we get the Hummel, and then we retroactively scoop up the Neruda. Now we have three pieces for solo trumpet and orchestra, or piano, or I guess forte piano, piano forte, yeah, whatever that instrument is. And so we're kind of getting there. And so people start thinking, yeah, we're going to figure out a better way to do chromatics, and they add the valves. And so there's a lot of different valves. I'll show you a different kind of valve system in a little while. I'm not going to be able to remember the name of it, but that's okay. Maybe I will by the time we get there. But anyway, it ends up, this is the cornet, and this is the type of instrument that Arban was playing when he wrote the Arban's book. That's the book we're going to talk about. And so I thought it would be appropriate to start on this instrument because I have a lot of vintage cornets. This particular one is a Kahn New York Wonder. It's an extremely good instrument, even by today's standards. Very small bore, and you can see there's sort of some bits and bobs here. You kind of have to add up like pieces of tubing to try to figure out how to get it the right length. And this one also has a tuning slide that you put your thumb on either side of, thumb and forefinger, and you tune every single note. So it's got a little like trombone built into it. And that's very good until you forget to put it back where it belongs after you play an out-of-tune note. But it has the regular piston valve, and it's basically what Arban also played a cornopian, which is a predecessor to the cornet, and you can look up pictures of all of these. Again, we have to get a lot done, so I didn't prepare a lecture on each one of these individual instruments. I thought I'd rather play the ones that I own for you. So we're going to play through the Arban's book, And I'm not going to go through every single word, but I want to get to the parts that you can read about. Arban himself, he was in a band called Julian's Orchestra, or Julian was a conductor, very famous. He restarted the Proms concerts, and Arban was second cornet actually in that band, and they played a lot of technical things. And Koenig was the guy's name that was on first base, and he was more of a soloist, and he wrote his own book as well, but you know, he didn't write the book, I guess. So his book is crazy. That's probably why it didn't survive. It's like play 20 minutes of a low A as loud as you can. Stupid stuff. But anyway, he tells you why he's writing the book. There's some controversy over this book, whether or not it was just sort of a sham that he put together to try to get gigs. It doesn't matter. It's a great book. Now, you have to look sort of sideways here, but you can see he's telling you what notes you can play on these instruments. Here's our B-flat cornet. Looks a lot like this, right? And he gives you a diagram. Now, you might wonder, like, well, why would you need this? If you already have the book, like, you probably know these parts, right? Again, it doesn't matter, but also you remember this is a fairly new instrument, and not everyone maybe knows all the things about it. And so it's good to have some, you know, idea of what's going on. So you can reference this. And of course, it's also in, by the way, it's in German and French as well. I used to have an edition that was in 7 languages, including Japanese. So there's a lot of them out there. But all right, we could go through all this. I do want to show you a cornet in C very briefly. I haven't even played this one yet. But he tells you here that the cornet... Uh-oh, that's not going to work. All right, excuse me for a moment. But he tells you that the cornet doesn't play very well in A in this section, but that's not really true anymore. As a matter of fact, some cornets play best in A. And so, but let me show you. Let me get to OBS and change the scene. Here we go, and I'm just going to mute my mic and play a couple notes on C cornet. This is a nice new modern Getzen C cornet. C cornets still played today. A lot of times in British brass bands, they'll be all B flats, but sometimes C. C with certain types of brass bands. So for instance, smaller groups that are still called brass bands, like the ceremonial brass bands, they will often have a C cornetist, and that will be a slightly different tone color. But anyway, there's a C cornet. That's one instrument down that we have. It's not otherwise particularly remarkable, and that's why we're not spending a lot of time on it, but just to show that they're still making them in C. All right, so back to the Arban's book. Oops, that's not taking you back, that's taking me back. There we go. So back to the Arban's book. So cornet in C, he talks about cornet in A. I'll show you that in a second. Then we've got these nice sort of fingering charts. This is a great place. Again, we're trying to be comprehensive here, and my point at the end of this lecture will basically be you only need these books. Now, you can have other books. It's always great to have other books, but, oops, excuse me. I'm setting a timer so I don't go over. It's always great to have other books, but if you only need one, get that one, right? And then you can supplement that with other books that are good. But I'm going to try to show you that you really only need this one, or the Clarke book, and really for basically all your brass instruments, and potentially for all your instruments. You could make your own band warm-ups out of these materials, and you know, it'll be fairly complete. Now, it doesn't have a clarinet fingering chart in here, of course, but you would only have to make very slight adjustments. So anyway, it tells you a lot of things here. How to use the tuning slide, which we just talked about. It's a little different on my cornet, right? It tells you how to make an embouchure. It tells you don't change an embouchure even if it's bad because it doesn't work. There's some truth to that, I guess. But anyway, there's a lot of stuff in here, how to basically play, right? And so that, oh, I'm talking to the wrong camera. So that might be something that you use a lot, right? Now, it's all with a grain of salt. This is fairly old material, but it doesn't mean it's bad. It's at least a place to start, right? And I mostly endorse what he says here, as long as you don't take it too seriously. He'll say, like, oh, you have to say to, and then sometimes do, and you know, don't use do too much because it's not very clean. Well, all right, don't get too serious about all that. Method of breathing, right? Where the jaw goes. I mean, you know, all kind of generalized, right? Style, yep, gotta have it. So let's get into the playing though. Let's see if I wrote that down. Well, I didn't. Okay. I wrote down the page numbers to everything else. This lecture's going great, isn't it, guys? All right, so first studies. A lot of people will play these with their students just to get kind of things going, right? I know that for trombone, a lot of trombone players use this, where they just play down first studies every time they meet. And that's fine, I think. That you can do that. So let's see if I can do this. So he says we have to breathe and blow in two, right? So you don't want to hear me play a bunch of long tones, but the point is, what are we doing here? Well, we're identifying the partials. We're also learning the fingerings, right? It's written right in there. And this is a really good way to actually just get started. And if you make these really long, you're playing long tones, that's a really good thing to do. All right, so let's keep going. What else do we have in here? Well, it's more of the same, right? More chromatics. Now we're starting to learn some accidentals. That's great. Now we're expanding the range. So this goes on until you start doing these sort of interval exercises. These might look familiar because they're in almost every beginning band book. We call these Remington sometimes. But, you know, way before Remington, there was Arban. So all of these, then it gets into these little etudes. And I'll play this one for you. I really like this one. So you can sort of hear the characteristic sound of this. It doesn't maybe sound like a normal trumpet, and that's because it's not. It's a cornet. But that's, again, what these books were written for, and so we're going to sort of get into that as we go. So that's first studies. It's basically, it gets into some scales in thirds, and there's a lot of overlap, a lot of redundancy in the Arban's book, and that's because he treats the first studies like you really need to know this first, right? And so you can see as I scroll through here, hope I'm not making anybody seasick, that basically you're playing diatonic scales, diatonic modes, and in different patterns, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of what we're looking for just to start, right? We want to be able to read music, we want to be able to play these key signatures, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so then we want to get into the rest of it, right? This is all like tonguing and scales and fingerings. What about flexibility? That seems like it's important, right? Well, if I go to page 52 for me, which is page 44 for the document, here we go. I think. Yeah, there it goes. All right. So this is the sort of infamous page 44 of the Arban's book, and it basically represents all of the ones that come before it all together. So if I go backwards in this document a little bit, you'll see, oh, I see, yes, there were slower slurs, right? And then there were faster slurs and faster slurs still, and faster slurs again, and then even more, and then even faster. And so number 22 on page 44 really represents like the culmination. Can I do all that at once? And so it becomes a really good kind of, you know, just try to do this, and you take care of your sort of fast flexibility every day. So let me do that for you now. And you'll see that there's alternate fingerings here for the regular notes. That's because he wants to make the lip slur as small as possible. So here we go. And these are really good to do as a group because it kind of it helps people sort of want to compete or play against each other, right? If somebody else can play the sextuplet at the end, I should be able to do that, right? And if you don't tell people that things are hard, then they don't know, and then they try and they figure it out. So that's a really good one to do with everybody. And it's really then just a sort of fingering exercise for woodwinds or whatever. But I think it's a good one to warm up your brass players really good. And you can do it faster and slower. I like to do it stupidly fast. So let's do one that's stupid fast. I'll do, I don't know, this one. Whew, almost lost it there. Okay, so that's the flexibilities, and it gets even worse if you go down further. There's flexibility and tied together with tonguing. That's pretty hard. And then once you get that, you've got these little twitchy ones at the bottom of the page here. Oh, you can't quite see it because my head's in the way. There we go. And then my favorite one, which is number 27, and that one goes like this. So learning to control things and trust things, and you just really do it, right? It might sound impossible, and especially if you're trying to play the trumpet right now, you might be like, I'll never be able to do that. Well, if you keep trying at something, I'm not saying that you need to do that, but if you're trying to work with a student who is a trumpet player, if you just kind of give them the example and let them try to figure it out, a lot of times they will. And that's really what we're all doing, right? There's not, if there was a method that you could just follow and be successful, then we would charge a lot of money for that. Unfortunately, that takes private lessons and a lot of different methods, and that's because what we're really doing is always just figuring it out ourselves. So, but we need some materials, and that's what the Arban's book is doing for us. All right, we'll fly through the rest of the book because a lot of it is, again, like I said, redundant. But I just want to show you where things are, right? So we've got we've got scales next, and that is going to be on page 58. And so I think that's 64 for me, maybe. Oh, almost. Okay, so here's scales. And you might say, well, you know, I can just get a scale sheet or something. Well, it's more than that, right? These beginning ones are the diatonic modes, right? And then, if I can get back to it, and then it starts to do other stuff, up and down, great. Okay, now a little bit of arpeggios. And then descending instead of ascending, right? And then really fast up and down, still diatonic modes. But then we start to get other keys. And he just goes through every one of them. He doesn't do as many things in each one of them. So in other words, you're sort of supposed to just apply the patterns from the first one to the next one. But you start getting scales in thirds and fourths. And he does this again in intervals later, so we'll keep moving. But it's a good place to get your scales. And if you're, again, these are great to do as a whole band, but it's also just like if you just kind of work your way progressively through the Arban's book as a singular trumpet player, I'm just alone here in my house trying to figure out how to play this stuff. Well, then I just do the next one, and I do it until I can do it, right? And then I move on to the next one. And every once in a while I might have to go back and check on some things, but you could do just the Arban's book alone with no teacher for, gosh, probably a couple of years, and you'd still get better every single day. All right, so then we've got, oh, this is really interesting. So then we've got ornaments, which is on page 87. It's my page 95. There we go. And he explains grace notes. And, this is one of those things that a lot of people are like, I don't know why that's even in this book. Well, people don't know that already. And I still have college students that come to me and they're like, what do these little squiggly lines mean? And so I just send them here. But also it explains it really, really well. So if I can find some of the exercises, let's see. So yeah, these are little gruppettos, right? And then when we get to trills, he writes out the trills. I mean, it's really brilliant the way that he does it. Oh, these are little etudes so that you have to practice. The double appoggiatura, yeah. So I mean, it's really just he makes it obvious is the point, right? That you're you're not guessing as to what you're supposed to do. I'm trying to find this specific spot. Grace notes, the portamento is great. We don't really do that anymore the way that it is in this book, but it's still great. There's the trills. Okay, the trill or shake. And so, again, this is just kind of saying like, okay, if you didn't know, this is what it is, right? And you can see it's like and he shows you like, well, sometimes it's chromatic and sometimes it's diatonic, and you have to know which one. And then here's how to finish a trill, right? The end of these, number 61, the end of each line, you do a trill finisher. And so he just kind of programs this all in, and then eventually he starts writing it out like this, right? So you see the top line, but you're going to play the bottom line. Easy. I mean, it's not easy to look at, but it's easy to do. So, so that's the ornaments section. Then next we have the intervals section, and I guess I should switch trumpets here. Let me pull it up and then I'll switch. So, like I said, this has been the New York Wonder. I have to sort of tune this thing, but it's an interesting instrument. And get back to you. Okay. I'm also playing a vintage mouthpiece. We can talk about mouthpieces sometime, I guess, but this is a mouthpiece that is a Vincent Bach New York mouthpiece from around 1935 or 40 with a screw rim. And so very rare instrument, instrument accessory, I guess. Let's play this one next. So that instrument that I just played was from about, oh gosh, a turn of the century, probably 1900, roughly. This instrument that I'm about to play needs a little work on the valves, and this would be a good time to do that too. But this is going to play in A because we have this very long lead pipe on it. And these are interchangeable. I can just take this out and I can put in another one that puts it in B flat, and then I have to adjust all the slides. But this is a Jules Levy, and he was another famous cornetist, but this is not a courtois. What is this actually? No, this is a courtois, excuse me. That was a con, and this is a courtois. So a French maker, and Levy was a French cornetist. But in this case, you put your thumb in this sort of spot. Here, let me go back to the big camera. You put your thumb in this spot, right, on the tuning slide, then you can do the same thing we did before, where I'm tuning every note, right? And you can see now the long lead pipe. And I'm going to use that same mouthpiece from before. Sometimes you want to put bits and bobs in here to make it play better, but I'm just going to try to play it and see how it goes. I also have my tuner on all the time, so let's see. Yeah, it needs to be out a little bit further. Well, we'll just deal with it. Sorry to those of you who have perfect pitch. But okay, so now let's go back to our Arban's book, and this instrument is from about 1882, I think. I'd have to look up. There's all this stuff on the bell that you, even if I got it real close, you couldn't see it, but that tells you all the awards that they've won, and then some nice little scroll work. And they're really works of art, these instruments. A little scroll around the different parts on the trumpet, or on the cornet, excuse me. But anyway, all right, well, we're looking at intervals. And so it gives you an idea of, what these things are, but let's get into it. And you can see this is just an interval exercise like you might find in beginning band, but this book is free. And so, and then he suggests, this is from the editors of this particular edition, like, oh, you could slur it all, or you could slur 2 of them at a time. But he just goes through all the intervals and in all the different keys. So basically every note to every other note. And you should be able to do that, right? And then he keeps expanding beyond the octave. And then these exercises on triplets, these are really kind of interesting. Triplet is not an interval, but he does talk about it like it is one. And so, but anyway, it's just more of the same. And again, you could probably skip some of these because you've already done them in other chapters, so to speak. But they're just scales and different patterns and things like that. What I'm trying to find is the next section. Oh, well, chords, we haven't done chords. So on page, we're almost there. On page 140 something, there we go, 142, you get these nice little major and minor chords. And so let's play one of these, make this instrument go. And notice the difference between the 2 instruments. Here, I'll even put it on this mode so you can see. so maybe not my most in tune moments there, but that's where it is. So anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on any given section, and I want to play all these instruments for you. So I'm going to switch to the last cornet. That was just a little taste of this. It also sucks to play an A these days because your ear doesn't like it. The instrument plays quite well, but I just have to play it for a few days and get used to it. So the last instrument of the time period that would be appropriate for the Arban's book is this one. This is a Boston 3-star, and you might notice that it looks a little bit more like a traditional trumpet, right? I'll put it in the big camera again. Yeah, this looks not totally dissimilar to that, right? It's getting a little more cylindrical, a little longer, and it does play a little more like you would expect a trumpet to play. In fact, if you are teaching a band in a particular area, then you may have some people playing instruments like these in your band, and that's just because that it was handed down to them, right? This is from about 1915 or 1911 actually, and it plays a lot like a trumpet really. It's got a lot of sort of cornet holdovers, but otherwise it plays pretty well. So I'm just going to keep playing this for the Arban's book, and then we'll get into the other stuff. All right, so here we go. We've got all that. Then we're going to get into multiple tonguing, and this is really where we start to get like the heart of the Arban's book. That was all well and good, but let's see. Multiple tonguing is page 153, and so here we go. And he talks about it again. You should read all this. It starts with triple tonguing, and so you should definitely just kind of think about that for a second, but we'll do some of these. And I like to overlap I just did my live stream. You should subscribe to my channel and just tell all your trumpet students to go to it, because I try to do live streams every single week. I usually do it about 3 out of 4 weeks, but I just did this. It's the very last one that I did before this, 2 weeks ago actually. So I'm going to do some of it for you now though, and I like to overlap my double and triple tonguing and my single tongue. And so it says 2-2-2-2-2-2 here. I'm going to go 2-2-2-2-2-2, and then I'm going to go 2-2-2-2-2-2. And then there's also the TKT version of triple tonguing, which is 2-2-2-2-2-2. And if that's confusing, watch my last video. Basically, if you want to do it, you just have to say it a lot while you're walking around doing stuff. Just get those syllables working for you, and then you apply that through an airstream through the trumpet or cornet, and it works great. But here we go. I'll play a couple of these. So you get the idea, right? Multiple tonguing, and then there's double tonguing later, and they're really hard. I mean, I can't do all of them, and certainly not all in a row. And so I work on these probably about once a week just to make sure I'm doing it right. Okay, this is great. Then after that, I keep clicking on the wrong thing. Then we get some things that are maybe less technical, right? This has all been just figure out how to play this stuff, right? But then we get this, oops, that's the slur and double tonguing. I thought I had the page number right. I should just trust myself. Nope. Ah, there we go. Art of phrasing. And so these nice little tunes are, they're just that. They're just nice little tunes. And so you, as a trumpet player, you know, I'm working on my triple tongue, I'm working on my range, I'm working on my flexibility, and all of that's fine and well and good, but I'm going to get bored if that's all I do. And so, and also it's not music, that's technique, right? And so this is a great place to come and play some just nice, beautiful melodies. And they're all famous melodies at the time. You probably know maybe 1/10 of them today, but you know some of them. And I like these, some of them, like Woodman Spare That Tree, you know, like, I don't know, they just have comforting, silly names. And then some of them are, like I said, famous. And they get harder as you go. And so these are some that you can play right now. When I taught this class as one-on-one lessons a long, long time ago, this was part of the final exam, was you had to play one of the art of phrasing. And so they only go up to about G on top of the staff, sometimes a little higher for a little while, and then they get harder and harder. And that way you could pick which one was actually challenging to you. So check this section out. It's fun to just try them out. And like I said, they get into like full-blown actual pieces, so check it out. The next one is duets, and that's going to be many pages. There's so many of these. But duets are an important part of just, oh, see, I wrote down the pages and then I guess I messed myself up. Okay, they're an important part of development because, well, first of all, you can use them if you can play any instrument and transpose or whatever you need to do, you can play duets with your students. And then they have to sort of follow you and they have to keep going even if they mess up, and they have to, you know, be in tune with you and follow your expressive sort of musical ideas. And so duets are really important pedagogically. We still use them at the college level, and I wish more people would use them all the time. And then also your students can play duets, right? So they have like something to do in their spare time. So I think they're really good, and there's a ton of them here that are all similar, like very nice, comforting, silly names. Well, I guess Russian hymn isn't terribly silly, right? But it is what you think it is, right? That one you probably know. So then later on, let's see if I can get the page number right this time. So it's my 293. Let's see if that works. We get the characteristic studies, and these are hard. And it even tells you in the section before this, like, these are designed to challenge you. And we do these all the time. I'll play a little bit of this one, I guess. But actually, let's play a less standard one. Number 2 really gives me nightmares, so I'm not going to play that for you. But they basically follow this pattern of like, they're technical and then they're lyrical. This one doesn't have a lyrical section really. I can try to play this. I don't know how well it will go, but I guess we'll find out. Oh, I better keep it on the big version for me because I can't see that. Okay. I ran out of notes on the page. And you ran out of notes like a line ago. So anyway, that's some of that. And they're all at least that hard. And well, they take a lot of time to learn. And so you really don't run out of stuff. And we haven't even gotten to the end of the book. The end of the book is just solos. And they're accompanied solos and everything. So let's see, 308 for me. Oh, ran right by it. Let's see what this page says. Which just says it is something. Okay, 308. So this is just a section of 12 fantasies and air variations on an air. And he tells you what they are, and you might notice some, Carnival of Venice is in there, Fantasy Brilliant, famous cornet solos. Dr. Staub is probably nodding his head right now because the euphonium steals all of these as well. And they're great, and they're just absolute lyrical, beautiful melodies, and then technique and technique and technique and technique. And they're really very showy pieces. And so, anyway, that's the Arban's book. I hope that I've presented it in such a way that it seems like, oh yeah, I could totally use that, right? Okay, so I'm going to put this cornet away, and then we're going to very quickly, well, I'm just going to throw these over here, just off screen, and hope that I don't run into that later. Okay, so very quickly, we're going to look into the Clarke book. And the Clarke book should be, let's see if the elementary studies, right. So we're not going to play any of this, but I want you to see it because the elementary studies is, if you're wondering how to start somebody, you know, you're worried about, like, oh, I don't really know, I don't want to mess them up, you know, this is the book. Clarke was a cornet soloist a little bit later, sort of early 1900s, but he was, man, he was the best. And he tells you, look, position of the mouthpiece on the lips, right? It's exactly what you're like, oh, I don't know how to do that. He tells you. Now, it might not be the only way to do it, right? You might have heard of other ways that you like better, but if you need a book, this is the book, Clarke Elementary Studies. Commencing the tone, well, yeah, I'd like to know how to start playing. Method of breathing, always important, right? And then he starts off with music. Oh my gosh, can we, you know, isn't that what we're supposed to do? Oh, excuse me for a moment. There we go. If you didn't know why I'm making this video, I'm sick, and that's why I can't come to school. So, forgive me with my sort of mental, my frayed mental state and my sick body. But okay, and then this is the first lesson, and he tells you, it's a lot of words, but man, if you just read them, he tells you exactly how to do everything, and it's great. And it also teaches people how to read music, so you can read all this if you look up the book, but basically, it starts off with duets, of course, right? And so you have a part in this, and you need to play whatever instrument you actually sound good on. I cannot stress this enough. Please do not play bad sounds at your students because you think you should play the instrument they're playing. That doesn't help anyone. It makes you feel bad, first of all, but it also gives them a bad sound model. So if you play clarinet or flute, or you sing, or you can play the piano, I don't care, whatever it is, play the good instrument, not the bad instrument, especially for these, right? If you want to show somebody on the trumpet and you feel like that's useful to pick up a trumpet and show them something, I think that's great. But we want them to hear only good sounds, even if they aren't exclusively trumpet sounds. So anyway, you play these, and again, they're working on the note names, the fingerings, they've got them all right there. They're also accidentally working on intonation, right? You're playing sort of chord tones around their notes, and then it's also working on counting. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4 there. And then he gives you a metronome marking that makes sense so that you can make it through each bar at least in a breath to start, right? And so it goes on like this for, I think, 38 lessons or something, and it just gets progressively more like higher notes. You learn new notes, you learn new rhythms, you learn new note names, of course, and you can sort of just thumb through this. But that's what the elementary studies is. Let's go to the end of it and see where we end up in however many lessons. There's the 26th lesson, key of E, and now we're playing triplets, we're playing these funny intervals, we're playing all the way up to, all the way down to low F sharp, which is the lowest note on the trumpet, and all the way up to high A, which, hey, that'd be pretty good in, what is that, half a year, right? That'd be pretty amazing from starting from scratch. So this is the book I recommend for beginners. I think everybody should just get it. Again, it's free. I don't know if this one was supposed to be free, but it's like $18 if you buy it. So that's that book. Okay, then finally, the technical studies. And the technical studies I will play a little bit of just to show off some more trumpets as we go on here. But this book is, if you wanted a one-stop shop for band exercises for everyone, this is it. Because if now you need a bass clef and a treble clef version, but you've got the chromatic scale, and then if you look, let's say 1, well, that's trumpet in, maybe that's the trumpet in B flat, and then number 3 would be the same for flute in C. And so if you have a bass clef version and a treble clef version, then you can just chop it up with scissors and then paste it back together, and it'll take you all afternoon, but then you'll have made band books for your entire band out of one book. Well, you need to copy it first, of course. But there you go. So that was your chromatic scale. That's number 1. And it goes all the way up to high C. So if you can play all of these, again, they're progressive, they get higher. So if you can play all of these, that's pretty good. I would love to have every high school senior coming into my studio playing high C and their chromatic scale super fast. And there's a little etude at the end. And then second study, this is all your major scales. And he also gives you some advice at the top that's, I think, really important. So, you know, make sure you look at that if you're teaching trumpet. But just the patterns alone, there's your scales, right? All your major scales, not just up and down, but in these sort of, you know, up 3, down a 3rd pattern. And the only scale degree you don't play is scale degree 6, which is fine. You can learn that later. And then that also goes all the way up to G on top of the staff. Then the third study, I'll play this one. And let's just get into like regular trumpets for a second, right? What do you actually expect to see? Well, you're going to see trumpet in B flat, right? So here's trumpet in B flat. I'm not going to play the lowest ones because those are hard. How about we just play this one in C? That'll be easy to start. Okay, so here we go, number 52. And this is your 1-4-1-5-1 chord progression that's very standard, and it also means then you're playing your arpeggios. You should be able to hear now that's a different sound than the cornets we had before. You're also going to see a lot of C trumpet, and the C trumpet basically sounds like the B flat. I'll just play the same one so you can hear the difference in pitch as well. And we'll move this down a little bit so that you can see the bell of the trumpet. So there you go. And then normally we also have an E flat trumpet, which sometimes can play in D. I'm not going to convert it for you because it'll just take too much time. But an E flat trumpet, again, I'll play the same one. It's just pitched higher, right? You can see that it's smaller. And I suppose we don't need this anymore, so we'll go back to the main version. So you can see it's smaller than the C trumpet. It's lacking a bunch of tubing right here. And here's what it sounds like. So a little bit brighter maybe, but it's, again, supposed to sound basically like the C and B flat trumpets. And then we have a piccolo trumpet. And the piccolo trumpet, no, that's not what goes with that. The piccolo trumpet is very small, and it can be pitched in B flat or A. You just pull this out usually to put it in A. And that's because we use this for Baroque music, and it's pitched exactly half size from a B flat trumpet so that we can play higher with more security. It doesn't make it easier necessarily, it just makes it more secure. And so that sounds like this. So very bright sound, almost flute-like if we're doing it right. The piccolo trumpet is one of my favorites to play, and a lot of people find it difficult, so if you can do it well, then you get a lot of gigs. So there's the piccolo trumpet. Those are your standard 4 trumpets that everybody really needs to own eventually if they're going to be a professional trumpet player. So now let's get into some weird stuff. I've got with me a lot of weird stuff, but let's start with this guy. And sorry to turn my back to you. I'm going to try to go quickly. Now, this trumpet that I'm about to play for you is pitched in a lot of different keys. So this is a French Besson. This is actually the prototype for the modern trumpet. So this was the first one after those cornets that you saw before. This was the first one that sort of was in the shape that we use today. Oops, and it needs... Okay, I guess it worked. And so, and it has a much smaller, narrower sound because the bell is narrower, right? So, but this should be, this one is in a whole bunch of keys, and this is I kind of want to show you because it's very strange to have this these days. But they used to just want you to be able to play in any key without having to transpose the music maybe. So you might see clarinet in A, but you wanted to play that, so you just put your trumpet in A. You might see a flute in C, and so you'd put your trumpet in C. Now in this key, it's actually sort of in D flat. So let me play a little bit in each key for you. This is D flat. So kind of interesting. It's not really supposed to play in that key. It's because you're supposed to put this bit in it that happens to be a half step. So this would be in C now. And I know that we're getting late on time, but I'm just going to oil this valve because you should see how to do that as well. You just put it slightly out and you put some oil on it on both sides. On these old instruments, there's a little notch that you're not going to be able to see that has to fit into the notch in the valves, the valve casing, and so you want to make sure that's in there before you screw it on. But, oh, that's not working very well. Okay, well, let's see. So, sort of a regular C trumpet. You'd actually not really play orchestral literature with this very much, but anyway, it's also in key of B, in the key of B flat, and the key of A. And you change some parts on it to do that, but really fascinating instrument. So, before we run out of time more, I'm just going to continue to move through because it gets wilder and wilder, and you want to stay till the end. So, I know this video is now 47 minutes, but if you can stay maybe 3 minutes over. This, I hope this one works, is a CD ascending valve. So what this is, it's got this linkage on there. You can see there's an extra valve right here, right? And like here, I should say. And so we've got our 3 valves on the top, and then I've got this extra valve that I can push with my thumb, and that's going to put it in the key of D. So watch. And this was done so that you could mostly use 1 and 2 because the 3rd valve fingerings were out of tune and sort of hard on your face because we hadn't figured out how to make that efficient yet. And so this was basically to keep it all in easy fingerings, and so you'd just transpose on the fly in the key of D or C, and that's what this trumpet was made for. There's only about 5 of them in existence, and so now you've seen one. Again, moving right along, we have some deep trumpets. So this here is an alto cornet in the key of, I believe, E flat, and you'll see it looks just like a cornet but giant. So let's hear what that sounds like. Now this one in particular needs a valve job, so it's very like leaky, and that's why you can hear the partials don't really lock in. But this one works pretty well if I get the right mouthpiece. So this is an F alto trumpet. This is a modern Bach in F alto. Again, something you never see, but let's check it out. Sort of a trombone kind of sound, right? I have time just enough for a little bit more. So, I didn't show you the flugelhorn. This is a standard trumpet as well. Everybody would have one of these as well. Mine is a little bit sticky because I just took it to New York, but here we go. So just a mellow kind of sound. And then finally, well, next to finally, I guess, this is a really weird and interesting instrument, and I'm not even sure what to play it with, but we're going to go with a cornet mouthpiece. This is, first of all, the valves work like this. So they basically move an entirely different chunk of tubing into the air pattern and divert it in a different way, right? So this is a different kind of valve that didn't survive. And you can also notice that the shortest tube is the first valve. So when I play this, this is like second valve, and this is like first valve, but third valve is still third valve. So watch. it just, your brain breaks when you try to play it. And again, it also is very leaky. That's why these valves didn't survive, because they can't really be fixed to work very well. But anyway, I'll end with one silly one, if that wasn't silly enough. This is my bass trumpet in C. And the reason this is silly is because when I pull it out, it basically makes me look like a tiny miniature human, which I think is very funny. So there it is. And here's what it sounds like. If you're packing up to go to your next class, thank you so much for watching this, and thank you for staying a little bit longer, and thank you for excusing me because I'm sick. Watch the rest of the channel for great warm-ups. I'm sorry I didn't get into like Black Book, bad band director things. Maybe I can come in and talk about that for 10 minutes one day in the future. Can't do it. And as you can see, I'm not very good at it, but that's why nobody plays these, because they're extremely hard to work out. Trombone players usually play them, and that they would have a trombone receiver. But anyway, thank you so much, and come by my office or send me an email if you have any questions about anything. Thank you to Dr. Staub for making all this work, and I'll see you around ECU.